Good. That should be good. Okay.
Hello, good morning. Good morning and welcome.
Yep.
Okay, got it. I'll let you go ahead.
Just real quick, Sabrina and Sylvester friend from Prairie Hills Farm talking about targeted grazing with goats.
That's right.
Great.
And we'll kind of we'll talk about a little bit of sheep. We did enter the sheep grazing as well this year. So we'll nibble on that. Let me go ahead and do this and put our presentation up. All right, so like Heidi said, today we're going to be talking about targeted grazing and the viability that it can have on a small scale farm. My name is Sabrina Friend.
And I'm Sylvester Friend.
And we are the owners of Prairie Hills Farm. On our farm, we are on 9 acres located in Selma, Indiana. It is good to know that we started off as a homestead. Traditionally or originally, we were going to raise and grow the food that we wanted for our family the way that we saw best. After growing that food the first year, we realized that even looking for other small scale farms in our area that would possibly be producing the foods that we were not producing, it was hard to come by. So with that being said, we did scale our farm quickly after our first year of homesteading, in which case we grow goats, which we originally started with 6 goats. We do lamb, both for meat production and targeted brush clearing. And then we also raise broilers and turkey on pasture, and we also raise out a flock of egg layers for ourselves and our communities. Alongside the livestock, we do produce market style produce on our farm. We did have 5 hoop houses. The weather let us know that we needed 4. So we did lose 1 hoop house to the weather this season. And we have even more outdoor growing space. And then along with that, I did become a beekeeper, not so much for the honey originally, but for the pollination, because we know how important pollination is for a small scale food production and our local food system. So now we do produce our own raw local honey as well.
So before we proceed, how many people in here already have livestock that they're using or considered using for this type of a service? Okay, good, good. Okay. So you probably already know what is targeted grazing, but we'll just go over that. With ruminants, they will graze, right? But with targeted grazing, we're actually trying to target a specific area or prescribed grazing. And so it's very intentional. It is managed, and we use livestock other than maybe some equipment, machines, and other things. So throughout the country, some of the applications that have been used for targeted grazing is fire prevention or reduction, really getting a lot of those leaves, weeds, and dry matter. That's very big out west. For land management, homeowners, businesses that may not be able to use traditional equipment, whether for terrain reasons, too slope, on a hill, too wet, etc. Um, uh, and different things like that. So what we were able to do is really look at why would we or others use targeted grazing. And through this project, we were actually doing the research through SARE. And so that's where this project came to be. But like I said, some of the examples come from wanting to clean up fence lines and maybe some difficult squeezing area or space constrained areas. Some backyards, just really trying to reclaim backyards after a certain amount of years of different weeds or invasives really taking over the native grasses and different vegetation. Open fields, This was an interesting one that we've seen that there is some interest with, especially when people have transitioned from um, a new property and they don't know what's actually out there. There were a couple instances where there may have been different metals or just debris and didn't want to go out there with some big heavy equipment just for the implications of cost of damage of the equipment or what's actually out there. Different wooded areas with a lot of invasive. We'll talk a little bit about solar fields and how we utilize or how we help to service them, orchards, and some other different areas.
And then one that's mentioned on here that I thought was pretty exciting here is dams. So we had never worked a slope area before. And then we got a call. Yes. Yes, we will. But I was saying that one of the more interesting things that was on this list of examples of jobs is dams because the slope on them is so steep that, you know, machinery can't get on there. And so this year we had our first dam job and it was really steep and the goats got in there. You guys will see a before and after at the end of the slides of what the goats did, but they really got in there and cleared the dam. So of course that homeowner you know, was not getting flagged and tagged for all the weed brush that was growing up on the back of their dam. All right, so how targeted grazing entered the picture. So this is interesting because when we first started, like I said, we started as a homestead. We had 6 goats, and Sylvester would always say, "Well, if I'm going out there to feed 6 goats, what's it to go feed 100 goats?" And well, we quickly realized what the difference was, and the difference was the money, right? The money in feeding 6 goats is tremendously less than feeding 100 goats. So again, as all small scale farmers, we sat down at the drawing board and we said, hey, how can we utilize our livestock to go off and do work other than raising them out just to get them to the meat production? In that case, we started doing research and we saw that targeted grazing was big out west, like you mentioned earlier. And we said, well, how can we utilize that in the Midwest? We go to a lot of conferences, people are talking about the invasive species that are growing up. They're talking about the poison ivy, poison oak, and we said, maybe there's demand here. So once we got to the drawing board, again, we just asked ourselves, how would it help our farm? And in that, we realized it would diversify our income. It would help manage our land. If you guys were here in the earlier presentation, he talked a lot about rotational grazing. We wanted to rotational graze our goats as much as possible. However, on a small scale farm of 9 acres, that could be a little tricky. And so with the growing number of goats, still with the 9 acres, how can we move them along the land or move them on other land as much as possible? So again, it helped with our own land management. And then actually, we wanted to solve a problem, right? Not just for our small scale farm, but we wanted to solve a problem for customers. We wanted to solve a problem for our ecosystem around us. And what better way than targeted grazing? So that's how targeted grazing became an idea or conversation for us.
So you may be wondering, so who is your customer? How do you find your customer? Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit on this one. So we really meet customers in different ways. Sabrina just talked about when we went to conferences and different events, people talk about some of the issues that they're having with invasive species. One really big one, I mean, there's multiple, but it seems like the one that really irritates or is a problem for property and business owners is the honeysuckle bush, and poison ivy. But the honeysuckle bush is one that everybody has a special place in their heart. Um, and so just having conversations at some of those different conferences, we got to start to understand what was the need. Working with the NRCS and other farmers that go into those offices and really be able to start to quantify the need in our area. But we also find customers, the customers find us from when we are working on different jobs. We do have signage and things like that from an advertising standpoint. So the referral network, from conservancy groups that we have partnered and worked with, retreat centers, and just country landowners is initially that first initial. So the first initial contact will come either there or through our website. Um, the funny thing is there's been a lot of promotion of using goats for targeted grazing and weed clearing online. So you probably have seen videos on, YouTube to TikTok to Facebook of people that are utilizing goats and really sharing their experience with the goats, and a lot of before and after. And so this year, being our second year with uh, this process, there's been a lot of inquiries or an increased inquiries from our first year and just working with some of those other avenues that I just talked about. So after we get initial contact, which is usually a phone call or an email, we will follow up and make contact and really try to get understanding of what are they battling with on their specific property. From there, we'll go over, high level details, what they're trying to accomplish before going pretty much to the next step. And that's giving a free on-site consultation where we can put eyes on what is their vegetation, look at the mixture, make sure it's not going to be harmful to the health and safety of our animals, and get um, some site-specific details. From there, we would, if they move forward in the process, we'll schedule the time of their service, and then we'll ultimately bring out the goats. The one thing that I will note is that at each step in the process, there is a cost associated with it, right? Because there's time and there's labor that's associated with it, especially when you get to the scheduling the on-site visits. The some of the factors which we'll talk about here a little bit later on the overall costs um, will impact uh, the overall viability of this service for your specific zone or area.
Yes.
Not actually yes, I know invasive species is like one of the eco practices. That allow grazing. Usually it's like your acre side, chop, clear, right?
Yeah, very good question. Yes, the NRCS does have programs for utilize or well, the program is just like you said to reduce or eliminate invasive species. The property owner would be able to enroll in that program and utilize some of the funding that's available to work with us in that regard. So the NRCS doesn't, they're not an agent or anything like that, but utilizing livestock to mitigate. And then there's a set of criteria that is an option.
Great
And
question.
I'll actually say that this year we're able to service, or I guess last season, we were able to service some customers and clients with large land owners, and we were able to get them in contact so they could apply for some of those benefits. And then, we're looking forward to trying to serve those clients this year.
Great question. Great question. Because we didn't know that originally as well. And we're always in our local USDA office talking with Equip and Soil and Water. And they did tell us that this season. So going on from there, some materials used, like Sylvester said, once the client agrees to go ahead with our service, we'll go ahead, load up. So these are some of the materials that you would need. Hopefully, if you already don't have the livestock, you're thinking about getting the livestock for the job. So you'll need a truck and trailer that varies in cost, of course, your livestock, and again, that varies in cost. On our jobs, we usually range between 30 to 40 goats, and that is per acre. So we do acre minimums. And like I said, we're ranging and hauling off 30 to 40 goats for those jobs. You will need an electric netted fencing. The company that we love to go with is Premier One. They just make everything simple and professional. And so roughly 164 square foot row of fencing runs you about $210. You guys will have to check that online with inflation costs always going up. Again, you will need a solar battery to power your fencing, which is roughly $200 to $500 per charger, depending on the brand and all of that good stuff. You will want a voltage tester. Because again, with an acre job, or if you're doing multiple acres, or even if you have to make a run, you want to know that each of those fences is high, right? You don't want your goats getting out, going crazy, and you have to wrangle them on the job. The other thing is a water trough. What we've noticed is that when our goats are out clearing brush, there is a lot of water content in the actual forage that they're eating. So they don't really go through water, but again, as livestock owners and farmers, you want to make sure that they have access to fresh water. So you will want about a 50-gallon water trough for, again, about those 30 to 40 goats. We go out daily, we check water, make sure there's water there, top it off, make sure there's no leaves and all that crummy stuff. You want to keep it nice, clean, professional for your job site. And then step-ins. Step-ins run you about $2 per step-in. And you just really need those for like the corners of your fencing, right? Everything's not going to be exactly square on these jobs. So you just want to make sure that your fencing is nice and sturdy on those outer corners. And then we always take a clipboard, pen, and paper just to take notes from our clients, make sure that we know exactly what their goals are, if they have any concerns, if they have any trees or any like special places that they want marked off. We want to make sure that we know that before going in and actually setting up. And then we also have a phone or a tablet on here. The reason being is because nowadays they have these nice apps that you can actually download on your phone. And as you're walking the perimeter of an area that your client is wanting to have service, it'll go ahead and track it for you. It'll tell you the acreage of that, the dimension of it and everything. And then from there, you'll be able to save that image. And then you'll be able to utilize that for invoices or even other clarification. And so that you and the customer are both on the same page. And so from there, we go in, we set up, and we'll let the goats go to town. Okay.
So we talked about, and actually going back here a little bit, every job is going to be a little bit different, like we talked about before. And so some of the other materials that you may use just depending on the job, and we'll talk a little bit about that more with lamb, is like a big water tank, like an IBC tote. Sometimes just a water trough is not enough. And with our process of checking the goats every day, it's just added cost to bring in water every day with different vehicles. And so sometimes bringing those big totes out there to not have to do that works. And those are about $300 to $500, just depending on the size totes that you need for those. So this is pretty much the starter kit to just get up and going, just to go ahead and start that type of company.
And like Sylvester was saying, like with this being the starter kit, when we originally started, we thought, I think it was maybe 6 fences, because 4 fences will give you 1 exact acre. And then quickly we realized, well, if we're doing 2 acres on a job and we're just wanting to rotate the goats instead of loading them all the way back up into a trailer, breaking a fence down to rebuild a fence, you really want that additional fencing. So right now we have, I do believe, at 20 rows of fencing, and that will get us to about, if we're doing a 3-acre job, we can sufficiently or efficiently go ahead and rotate those, put up new paddocks, go ahead, drive the girls into a new paddock, break down another fence and go on from there. And then on some properties, we literally can't get the trailer where the goats are actually going to be working. So it's great to have extra fencing to like run a chute and things like that to their actual job sites. So if you're thinking about getting into it, I would say, starting off roughly with approximately 10 fencing and then going from there.
So we're talking about goats, but this year we did have the opportunity to work a solar field. So we also wanted to include the lamb in there because as you probably have noticed, there's a lot of conversation about more energy being needed, especially with different technologies that's coming that requires more energy. And so there is a large demand for additional solar fields to go up. And this year, like I said, we had the opportunity to service a solar field. And so we did want to talk about the lamb a little bit here. But goats in their nature, they are browsers. They like to eat with their heads up, right? They will eat grass, but if there is mixed vegetation that bushes, shrubs, trees, forest, that is their preference. And they just in how they browse and during the targeted grazing cycle, they eat, I don't want to say everything, but they eat quite a bit. And lambs are a little bit more selective. So a perfect job for a goat would be a lot of mixed vegetation, a lot of leafy, woody stems, trees, bushes, and things like that. Now going over to the lamb. Oh,
Quick question. So like you mentioned honeysuckle, when honeysuckle starts, it's just kind of a, it's
sapling.
a woody
Yep.
stem
Right.
early and then it develops big. So what do they do with the big stuff versus the stem stuff if you've seen it on like a honeysuckle type of plant?
Yep, absolutely. So when they are saplings or seedlings, and they aren't really a tree yet or a very thick bush, what we'll see is that they'll eat pretty much all of that plant down to the ground. When we look at your more mature honeysuckle bushes that are forming into trees, what we've noticed that the goats will do, they'll use those branches, the more of the trunk, and they kind of use that as a step ladder to get up to the vegetation. The other thing that they do, they eat around, and so they debark it to a certain degree. But when it's more mature, they do not eat all the way through it. So they pretty much strip everything from pretty much the ground to about 6 to 6.5 feet and down would be cleared.
And with that, I was gonna say, so we had a location that we grazed multiple times in a season. And what we noticed is even with the maybe 3 feet tall and below honeysuckle, they would go ahead and strip that. A lot of them that is lower than 3 feet, they even their body just moving through the woods would like break it, knock it over, things like that. But when we came back in the fall, there was like absolutely no new growth. So even if we graze in the spring, there's a protein in their saliva that really kills
Oh, wow.
and targets that. And so what we've seen is, again, there was no new growth in the fall. And we're going through like, oh my goodness, this honeysuckle just didn't grow back. That particular homeowner, they have a retreat center and their plan was to go through in the winter and just, kind of hand saw it at the bottom. But even without the goats, they wouldn't have even been able to get in there and clear that up. And then along with the bushes that are over my head, once they strip it, wherever they strip, it just doesn't grow back. So, yeah.
What lamb is a little bit different. They are grazers, so they like to keep their head down, so to speak, and they're not as active as goats are. So what we've experienced them being grazers, they will go through and eat the soft, tender grasses and some of the bushes. It's kind of hit or miss, but they leave quite a bit behind. And so those jobs, even in the solar field, where we primarily use the lamb, it's a lot slower process. And they spread out a little bit more, so to speak, instead of being highly focused like the goats. But they are both herd animals, so whoever is the leader of the herd, that's kind of where they go. But that's kind of the delineation between where we would want to use goats versus where we would want to use lamb.
You mentioned that you use about 30 to 40 goats per acre in your paddock. What about for the sheep?
For the lamb, good question. So for the goats, and when we say per acre, we usually set up our fence per acre. So we'll take, if it's a 1 acre job or multiple acre job, we'll take 30 to 40 goats on that job, just depending on certain criteria of the job. For lamb, that's more of a longer term solution. So the solar site that we were at was right under 4 acres. And we'll leave them out there all season and put up fencing. We had 18 lamb out there on that property. And it wasn't a full season, but we look at the gearing ratios based off of how many lamb per acre, and then extrapolate that out for the season, as well as how dense is their vegetation, what vegetation types, just to make sure that we are staying true to the gearing ratio. Because when we have goats or lambs out, we don't supplement, or we have minor supplement of food while they're on that job. We still take out minerals and we still, make sure that the health, but that would take away from the profitability or the revenue that we're looking for. But I guess to answer it plainly, it just depends on, some of those site factors. But we do about a 4 to 6 to 1 acre.
So that's more of a local grading. Trying to do it from rotation.
It just depends. So when we were at this solar field in particular, we did have to section them off. Now there were some time constraints, so we wanted them to be more focused. But as we go into this year, it would be a little bit more open, where we wouldn't section them off like half an acre or an acre at a time. We would, still stay true to rotationally graze and have about 2 acres, or based on the configuration of the solar, than true open field.
And like Sylvester said, the lamb this year for us was it was a lot of research, right? This solar field, we didn't start at the beginning of the season where grass is already low. They had already let it grow up and cut back on their mowing guys. So we really got in there and tried to get it as clear as possible and as grazed down as possible before November came. And so our sheep were out there still in November. Like you said, we went in with 18 of them. And we wanted to have them as the open field so that they can just graze around naturally as they would. However, we did have some situations where we learned, hey, we have to, fence them off, let them go row by row, and then just transition them like that. This year, though, I will say I do hope to add more, just because the sheep are like a slow grazer. And just for me personally, and I'm Sylvester may feel the same way. But as the farmer there and the grazer manager, I just would want the employer to come out and see their fields like maintained, if you will, because a lot of people look at solar fields and they see, nice lush green grass. I would like for them to have that appearance this year instead of last year, where they let it grow up, kind of get unruly, and it took the lamb a while to manage down. And even with that, after a while, Sylvester and I talked and we said, hey, we gotta get something different here, right? Because we kept coming out and seeing the same thing, like no progress was happening. And then in that case, we did add some goats to that job. And I think we added about 20 goats to that job. But what we did is we ran alleys. So the sheep could run underneath the solar panels themselves, and the goats were running in between them so that they couldn't have access to any wires or anything like that. But then we even noticed with that, the goats had no interest in the panels. Like this would be a panel and their fence would be like 2 inches away from the panel. So they could still jump that if they wanted to, but they had no interest in jumping in, no interest in headbutting it. There's no interest in the panels. And I don't know if that is because of the vibration that goes through the panels, or just instinctually they didn't want to climb in. But just like our electromagnetic fencing, they can tell when it's hot and when it's not because of the way the frequencies is moving through it. And I think that was the same cause with the solar panels. So it'd be interesting. I've seen some people out west and in Montana and those areas, they do graze goats on solar and they have no issues. So I'd be interested to see in the coming years if people are also using goat.
So using electromagnetic their client property, what do you do to communicate with them? Safety with the electromagnetic, so you're not getting people.
Great question. So we do have signage on there that's every so many feet. And that's even for these people in the neighborhood who's coming by, and like we do a municipal place so they know like, hey, this is a hotbed. But then again, it just goes along with the client education. So once we're there and we're setting up the fence and everything, we let them know that it is hot voltage at all times. If a branch or something falls on it or whatever, give us a call. We'll come out and manage that. We haven't had a situation where a goat would get caught in the netting, even if like the voltage was low, maybe from overcast days. But we always tell them, hey, it's a possibility. But if you see that, please go out, flip the switch off. So all of our clients know where the solar box is, how to switch it off, and then just give us a call. So yeah, and we'll kind of talk about those situations in a little bit too, because with adding a service like this, you have to be prepared for, unruly scheduling. You might get a call, and you got to go out and handle it. So, yeah. So why it makes sense for small scale farmers. And again, this goes back to our initial research and talking with each other about adding a service. And what we found is that really it is a low barrier to entry. So if you already have the livestock and you're not utilizing them for a service right now, you're just raising them out for meat, you can put them to work immediately. All of the materials that are used are flexiculture is what I like to call it. So whether we continue with this service or not, we can use all of that on our farm in just different capacities, right? So it's not going to go to waste. And there's always a plethora of farmers needing other materials that is flexiculture. So you can always resell it. It diversifies our income. One, we are direct to consumer farmers. We have a website where people go and purchase the meat. They come directly to our farms to pick up the meat or pick up the produce in season. And so we really wanted to know, like, when the season is low or we're having a bad season in produce or something like that, how can we diversify our farm income? And targeted grazing allows that or helps that. The other thing is, since we are direct to consumer, a lot of that which we are growing, we don't necessarily know where it's going to go before we grow it out, right? But with adding a service such as targeted brush clearing, we know ahead of time that this is a contract-based service. As long as we're going out, being customer facing, and we're getting jobs secured, is bringing in revenue to the farm. And with that, the biggest reason why we went into it was because we were growing the numbers. We wanted to see how the goats can feed themselves throughout the season, throughout the winter. And so again, it just brings in that revenue knowing that it's a contract-based service. And then the demand. So we started talking about the demand earlier. We knew it was a high demand out west. We didn't know for sure if it was a demand in the Midwest. Over the last 2 years, that was what our research was, and we came to the conclusion that there is a demand for it. Again, with residential customers, with municipalities, the solar companies, and more of them coming. And then again, with conservation organizations, really targeting those invasive species, really targeting that poison ivy, poison oak, and really their focus is managing their woodlands. And with a lot of the residents that we have serviced, what we have consistently heard over the last 2 years is that they want to go with a chemical-free solution and a heavy machinery-free solution. We had a client this year, they called out a tree company to help manage their woods. They told us that their bid was like $40,000. And so a lot of people are saying like, hey, how can we do this more affordable in a more managing way? And who doesn't like going out and seeing goats grazing on their property, but they don't have to manage them, right? So again, there is a high demand for it.
So getting into a little bit of the numbers, like we said, this is our second year um, uh, offering targeted grazing services. And so our first year, and we didn't mention it, but on our first slide, there was a Goats on the Go, if you've ever heard of them. We are affiliates of Goats on the Go, and we started with that affiliate group last May. So that kind of provides a little bit of insight on the timeline. Yeah, sorry. In 2024. So that's when we got our training. That's when we really started this service part of the business. So in that year, from May to October is really when our season kicked off and started. We had uh, we had a total of 6 inquiries, like we talked about before, and how customers get to know where we are. We were able to service 3 of those, and we serviced about 5 acres that year, and the revenue was 7,200. So in that first initial year, with all of our startup costs, buying fencing, getting a new trailer, and doing some of those things, we were not viable that year, but we knew with some direct marketing and different partnerships and getting our name out there and providing that service, since it's not so familiar in our area, that we knew, there's a cost to doing business. So last year was our second year, and we're still continue to be affiliates of Goats on the Go. Our first assignment started in April, and we went all the way through November. We were able to serve 15 jobs that we completed, and we had 27 inquiries. We do have a radius, so we do about 50 miles from our farm location. And what we've noticed is that we were getting people that were interested in Dayton, Ohio, because they didn't know anybody. And when they looked up, targeted grazing or goat brush clearing, we were their closest option. And so we had, some of those that just didn't make sense from a time allocation standpoint or a budgetary standpoint. It would be too high for customers. But as we continue to engage in our area, the density within our area was starting to get a little bit better as the season progressed. We didn't say this, but we, during the year, would do more than one job at a time. So our herd size is, we generally take out our females or does for our primary goat brush clearing. And we have about 70 does. So we were able to actually have about 2 groups out at a time if the demand called for it. From May until the middle of July, when we started our breeding, we did have 2 goats out or 2 groups out. So it looked like we didn't have goats. And a lot of our neighbors were like, "Are you guys, getting out of the goat business?" But we had to let them know that they were gainfully employed and working. So they were going to have to be offsite at the time. And then, we bred for a month, and then we got right back into it with at least 1 goat group going. So there is a demand for the targeted brush clearing. And it's just amazing the people that you meet and what the goals are, because everybody's not looking for a straight clear. We've had some customers that just want to reclaim a little bit of their backyard and go in during the winter or at another time and actually do some selective cutting themselves. We have some that want it down to the ground. And so just managing those expectations, and that's where going out and doing that on-site evaluation and understanding what their goals are, we can have realistic conversation on what their potential outcome may be.
Do you have a sense for, as you guys evaluate a job, like what kinds of jobs are the best bang for your buck? Meaning, like, it does take time and effort and gas, it takes inputs to get somewhere and set them up.
Yep.
And then take them back when they're finished. I could see where a really small job as far away might not be worth it. Like what what is the ideal situation when you guys are thinking about your pricing too? Like, what's the project that's the best? Oh, maybe you're not going to go into it.
Yeah.
It's most bang for your buck.
Yeah. So, I'll go over kind of the number so that's revenue, right? And so what we did here on this slide was really to show pricing, and then I'll kind of talk about some of the dips to your point, right? So an average per acre cost, and we do an acre minimum. And at the end of last year, we introduced a residential rate because we were getting some inquiries from city lots, half or a third of an acre or below, that people really wanted it. And this isn't necessarily about targeted grazing, but some people really want the goats on their property, right? And that's kind of a special allure for them to graze small sections. And so one of our highest profited jobs was somebody wanted to clean up a third of an acre where they were growing blueberry bushes. So they didn't have to manually do the work. The biggest thing there was she just wanted the goats there. We, not that we didn't want the business, but we said you could do this, that would be more affordable, or you could do that. And she said, no, I have a couple grandkids who want to see goats and I need this done. So some of the grazing jobs is more of a entertainment job.
Oh, yeah, agritourism.
Absolutely. Versus the actual the job from a homeowner or a landowner that wants to reclaim their land or get rid of invasives. So the range is about 1,000 to 1,600 per acre when we look at that from the revenue side. And some of the main factors, and you just talked about it when you asked the question, what kind of vegetation is there? How easy is it to get there, or how far is it away in mileage? How complex is the land or property that we are going to be working? So that goes into, are there a lot of trees? Is it on a hill? Is it in a ravine? Is there, are we going through a river and over the woods, right? Some of those site-specific criteria will, change the impact. How many days do we think we're going to be there? Because we don't do it by days, we do it by acre. And so we have a spreadsheet and calculations and things of that nature where we go in. And then is there water available at the site, or do we need to haul it in? So all these are factors that we look at, and then labor costs to perform those. So I'll just talk about a couple of these jobs that are down there. The blue is the overall revenue for the job. The orange is what was the profit, and then that line is basically the clear indication of the profit line. So job number one, that was, and sorry, we target to be about 50% profit is what our target is, just so you have a baseline on what's good and what's not, and I'll talk through a couple of these. So the first one was a job that was literally 5 miles down the road, and it was about a 4-acre job. So that's the best, right? Closest to proximity for us, because since we go and visit every single day, the mileage and the cost of mileage and the time away in labor is really reduced to go check the goats and check the fencing and things like that. So very close to you in any size property, that's a very good job. Another high profit job that we had was what I just talked about, a very small area. It was only about 35 minutes away, 25 miles, and it was a 2-day job. So that was a very good job, but from a profit standpoint. When we look at job number 6, what we learned on this job, it was not a good job for us. And there were some uncontrollable factors that we didn't necessarily consider, but we have more data now that really impact that, and that was weather and time of the year. So the time of the year will truly impact how many times will you visit, how quickly will the vegetation be consumed or eaten. And this job was in Ohio, about 60 miles away. We anticipated that that job was going to be about a 5-day job, and it ended up being a 13-day job. So what we realized, or what we seen, was that the goats, because I went to go check them at different times to really try to get a good understanding of what was going on. The goats were primarily grazing late evening, early morning until about 10 o'clock. And then they would just try to get as much shade as possible and then not go back out until about 6, 7 o'clock and start grazing again. So we were losing about 12 to 13 hours a day of grazing capability, but that was a big lesson learned that we had over the course of the heat of the summer when it was dry.
And then just to kind of go back and answer your question plainly, because we do work together on this job and this service and setting up. For me, I think the perfect ideal job is if we're doing 2 or more acres on a job, if there's already water access there, and if there is top canopy and enough brush for them to stay busy like all day long. And so with that, those are like the perfect ideal brush clearing.
And then you just kind of work.
And then close to home. Yep. And then even like Sylvester said, like some of the jobs are like people just wanting the goats. And I think last year we probably only did 2 of those because at some point, like we have to say like, hey, these girls are workers and we just don't have time for that. Like this isn't necessarily the job for them. But yeah, so I think we only did 1 of those. And then sometimes we get calls on like birthday parties or fundraiser events, and even those, like we use discretion, right? We did do a fundraiser event for Ball State University. It's 20 minutes from our house. The frat boys have come out to our farm, have done, community service work. So we were like, of course, we'll bring some goats out for goats and floats, and things like that. And that brings profit back to the farm. So it gets fun. It does get fun. Some of the uncontrollables of which we have talked about. The first one that most people don't talk about is predator pressure. We have luckily never had predator pressure with our goats on a job. The electromagnetic fencing really keeps the predators out, even from coyotes, from neighborhood dogs, stray dogs, whatever, keeps them out. Cats don't get in. However, when we introduced lamb onto the solar property, we did have our first experience with a predator problem. We went around that 4 acres with tape measures, measuring their fence. They had a fence up already. We measured in between fencing and everything. We thought it was sufficient to keep any predators out. However, we were wrong. One night, a predator did get in. And after that, as farmers, we decided, hey, we're not going to pull the sheep off of this job because we lost 1, but we are going to come in with electromagnetic fencing. And when we came in with electromagnetic fencing, we had no issues after that. The other great thing is since we were working with a company, we sat down with them, just kind of let them know what had happened. Not that it was their fault or not that they, owed us anything after that. But he went in and said, hey, well, we have some guys on our teams that can come in and trap them. We'll work with DNR. We'll help you guys out because we really want this service and we want your sheep to be safe. So with that, with the electromagnetic fencing and with their trapping and relocating, we didn't have any more problems. The client education is another uncontrollable. Just making sure that you're managing their expectations, letting them know, like, hey, with the honeysuckle, a goat is not going to come in and gnaw through a whole tree, right? It's not going to take a tree down like a beaver. However, this is what it's going to do. It's going to come in, it's going to strip all of the vegetation off of it so that you can clearly see and walk through your woods. And then at a later time, or even if you get another service company to come in and then actually cut those from the base and remove them, that kind of stuff. So making sure the client knows exactly what the expectations are, and all that good stuff. And then, like Sylvester said, usually our goats are eating everything from the ground upwards to about 6.5 feet high. So as you can imagine, like if you're in a dense wooded area, after goats come in, you can clearly see through that and you can move through it. They even like take out briar and multiflora rose, which is very thorny, right? It's like ripping through our clothes and our skin, and the goats will like you can see it evidently strip that to where a client can go in and just kind of weed whack it at the bottom, pull it out, and it's not coming back. Weather delays. So, like Sylvester said, very hot days. They're not grazing throughout the day. They're mainly doing third shift, early morning. If it rains, we raise Kiko goats. I don't know if we said that. So they're big body, full body goats. We leave horns intact, all of that good stuff. And some of them they don't mind the weather. However, if they're out in an open field and there's no, canopy over them, they're just standing when it's raining. Even if it's like a light rain, they're just standing there. And so that again slows the time. And I don't think that we said that 30 to 40 goats will clear an acre in about 5 to 7 days. So that kind of gives you, if it rains 2 days, we're looking at 8 to 9 days, right? And again, that depends on the density. If it's not that dense, that 5 to 7 days can become 3 to 5 days. If it's very, very dense, that 5 to 7 days in an acre, still with 30 to 40 goats, again, can go upwards of the 5 to 8, 9 days. Unplanned site visits. So we mentioned like if something was to happen, we had a storm out in Anderson. And our back fence line ran right in the alleyway. And I was like, man, I feel like I should go out there and check that fence. I should go out there and check the fence. The homeowner was like texting me all through it. She was like, I'm kind of worried about the goats. And I was like, well, don't be worried about the goats because even if they were on the farm right now through this storm, they would still just do what they're doing. We never lock our goats in, none of that. So we were like, the goats will be fine, I'm sure. But again, my concern as a farmer was the fence line and because it backed up to an alley. So I do believe it was late that night. I went out there and sure enough, a tree that she could not see had fallen onto that fence line. None of our goats got out. They didn't care to get out. They say right in the fence. But again, I was there to manage it, turn the fence off, make sure that branch gets off, make sure that the alley is clear, and then make sure that the fence goes back up properly. Or one instant, our girls, after a while with goats, they're very smart. They know the drill. If there's a fence here, they're in it. But one day we had kind of let them overgraze a wooded area and we knew that the vegetation was getting really low. They were probably going to be bad, kind of loud for some food. We were going to go pick them up and I got a phone call from the homeowner saying, one of your goats are out. And I was like, I'm on my way to your house right now though. So luckily it was pickup day. But for some reason, the fence was not down. She jumped it, trying to get to the other part of the woods. And so we got her, managed it. But you will get caught sometimes and you kind of got to drop what you're doing, go check on your goats. And then equipment issues. One time, we bagged into a solar charger. And that was when we were all the way out in Ohio. We didn't bring an extra solar charger with us. And so we had to really like come up with something quick, fast. We already had to go there. I already had fencing up and boom, we hit a solar charger. So you got to think about those kind of things. Know where your quickest Tractor Supply, Rural King is or farm store. Try to pick something up. And it cuts into the profit, right? Because you got to get something right now. And then traffic and fuel costs. We can't control the fuel costs. So today you might make an invoice and then, fuel goes up 20, 30 cents. So that kind of cuts into it as well. The traffic time on those hot days really, makes time go slower and all that good stuff, or all that bad stuff, the unfun stuff.
So we'll run through the last couple slides since we're getting pressed on time. But really, it's just an ever-changing kind of model. So I'll let you guys read through that, but just simple and plain for us, what we've experienced and what we've seen with the clients that we were able to serve and the demand, and just the model that we used on our estimation and spreadsheets and things like that on what we think the job is going to take, and then obviously with lesson learned from year to year, it has been viable for us for what our goals are. This year we had a goal of 20 acres. We were right at 19 and some change, so we pretty much hit that goal. And then our financial goal was for the goats to be able to pay for themselves during this 20-week season and pay for their feed and healthcare for the whole year. And they were able to do that. So as we continue to move forward this year, we are looking to expand not the number of goats, but as many jobs as we're going to be going for. And just like we had the question earlier, what job are we going to be targeting, since we have already gotten a good amount of inquiries, are the ones that are closer to home or, close in radius. Over 2 acres we've seen are pretty good and have good dense vegetation. So we can continue to go through those and to be more profitable. And then for some of the last pictures, just wanted to show some before and afters, some pictures where we were at the same exact spot. So you can see in this picture on your right, that was when we first got there to that location. After the goats got in there, start stepping on some things, breaking some things down and eating, it actually opened it up to the picture on my left. And so it just shows what the goats can do. And this job, that is just one corner of it, but that was right over an acre job, and they were able to complete that in about 6 days.
So this is actually the job of the dam that we were talking about. I think the dam was 2 acres. So we broke it up to 2 paddocks, and they had grazed another location on that same property. But this was another great experience with the goats. I mean, it was just really overgrown. And they were getting flagged for it being overgrown and sectors and stuff like that. So they needed a solution, and they gave us a call. And as you guys can see on your left, just how dense it was, very, very dense. And on your right there, just how much they were able to eat it down and strip it.
And then this one, Sabrina talked about the briars and bushes and things like that. This is very similar before and after what they were able to do with the homeowners. Was very happy with the progress that they had, stripping it, getting in there. The goal for this homeowner was to basically get rid of the vegetation, get rid of the thorns, so they could go in and cut some of this out. They were very selective on what they wanted to cut and what they wanted to keep, which was invasive, non-invasive. And they were very pleased with how agile the goats were and how they adhered to the fencing and things like that to preserve the natural species that they wanted to preserve in those areas.
Just wanted to, before we end here, I wanted to ask, so your revenue of 2025, you said was around 22,300.
That's right.
And you said that you're aiming for about 50% profit. So that's what I was wondering. Do you feel like you were around 50%?
We were. Yeah. We actually ended up with a 54% profit for the year. Yeah, so we hit our goals. And I think with some of the lessons learned, if all things are equal this year, but we'd probably do a little bit better. But we also don't control the costs of some of those uncontrollables. But we did hit our goal for the year.
That doesn't meet.
No. And the other thing that I think the slide might have got misplaced or out of here, but from what they don't eat, right? That's the other reduction in costs, or the other implicit variable that's a benefit. Our herd, per herd, it's about $13 to $18 a day, that if they were on farm, that it would cost us to feed them. When they're off farm, feed and hay. When they're off farm, we save that $13 to $18 per day, just depending on the size of the group. With two groups out, we can anticipate 23 to about $36 a day that we're saving, not having to feed and manage the goats and things of that nature. So that's the other piece that was not captured. It must have fell out, but it wasn't captured in this presentation. But that's the implicit cost savings, as well as the 12,000 that was in profit.
So if you have them off the farm, you don't feed them any grain at all.
No.
Not when they're on the job.
Just what they're, put the vegetation down.
Yes, and we always bring grain with us just because as it starts to wind down and you're moving the fence around and things of that nature, the first and foremost is we always want to make sure the health of the goats are intact. So we'll still bring minerals and we'll still bring grain with us, but we don't administer it unless they need it. We haven't had a problem with temperature other than it being too hot.
Worms.
Oh, worms. So when they come back to the farm, we'll worm them. We do a daily check. So we look at fecal matter, we look at FOMACHA scores, we're looking at their body condition every single day that we're out there. If there is an issue with a goat or the group of goats, we will take care of that and treat them, take them back to the farm, and get them back to health before rejoining.
But even with that, with the wormers, we only deworm our goats when needed. And I think with us selecting Kiko goats, just being a hardier goat, we don't see them getting soft stool or anything like that on the job. And actually, this season was the first year I looked at Sylvester and I said, wow, like these girls are the healthiest that they've probably ever been, just on all of this diverse forage and the different pastures going from place to place. Honestly, I think it's really done a great job at mitigating worms. I think we only had one, and it was a young goat that had like soft stool all season long. So I really equate that to the diversity and just the breed of goats that we have. We know other people that say that they raise boar goats, and we had a couple boar goats in our rotation, and honestly, they're not even really great grazers. They're kind of like the lazier goats of goats. So with Kikos, I mean, they're hardy. They go after it. They know that they're on a job. They get excited about the brush. And so that's what we like to see. But we really don't have a problem with managing worms. So yeah. And even from the presentation earlier, and you were talking about the different grasses and things like that, and how much protein some grasses have versus other grasses. And again, I think that is exactly what our growth was experiencing this year, just going from location to location, grazing different brush, different grasses, different herbaceous trees and shrubs like that. So I think it played a big role on their health in a good way, in a great way. Yeah. Any more questions? Any more questions?
How do you spell it? Kiko.
Kiko. And they are from New Zealand. They are basically a
mix of all.
Yeah.
They're a mix of all the goats.
Yeah, and so it's kind of the strongest survive mentality. So they're very hardy. Hooves don't grow, or for hoof maintenance, it's lower. They have good pesticide resistance and things like that. So a feral goat. They imported them long time ago, but there's breeders here.
Yep. And right now you can really find them at a lot of the auctions. You'll find them. I mean, and they might be a cross between a Kiko and another goat, but you can find Kikos. They're, like I said, they're a full body goat. Most of the time people keep them horns intact. I don't think I've ever seen anybody with a Kiko that dehorns them. They're docile goats and very smart. They're very smart. When they see our trailer bagging up, they're waiting at the gate. People ask us all the time, like, are you forcing the goats to go work? And we're like, no, you should see us when we bang that trailer up and they're excited.
Yeah.
And even then, like we said, we load up 30 to 40 of them. We're never pulling them or selecting them. If they want to load, they load. If they don't want to load, they don't load. And when we have 2 jobs going that first day, whoever loads, we count them up. If we need a couple more, we'll open the gate, let a couple more run in, close the gate. And then 2 days later, we're bagging that trailer up for a new job. And that group of girls who didn't want to go, they're like, wait, we know they just went off to a job, so we're ready to go off to a job too. And even from the job, when we're collecting them and they finish clearing, they're waiting on us and they know it. They trample onto that trailer, we close that gate and we call them home. So they're very smart.
Yeah, a lot of times we gotta cut them off.
Yeah.
Because more want to jump in than, you know, the job allows, so. But we ran over, but thank you guys so much for your questions and engagement.
Yeah, we have an hour until lunch. There are some activities happening in the conference room and the exhibit hall, or you can just hang out and ask questions.
Great job. Great to meet you guys. I'm Kevin.
Hi, Kevin. Sabrina.
I had a couple more questions.
Yeah.
I didn't want to keep everybody, but quick one is you said you got a SARE grant to get started with this.
That's
So
right.
Are you guys gonna have a publication coming out of this?
Yes, we actually just completed